welcome back to Room 237 as I continue my marathon of Italian horror and Giallo films. And for this, we're going to a early Giallo, when Giallo in Italian horror was still had a gothic feel to it. 1966's The Murder Clinic. And I think this is just a cheap Blu-ray. I mean, I found the store I go to had this for like $6. But, like, the menu literally has this photo with just play movie. Put out by Real Vault, which I'm thinking is like a third-party bootleg. I mean, you can even feel the label that's on it. But anyway, it looks fairly decent. Still has kind of it looks like a very good VHS transfer, actually. I thought it looked just fine. I actually think this is more of like a Herschel Gordon Lewis cover than the movie kind of deserves, because it's not a super bloody movie. In fact, well, there's going to be numerous references to Mario Bava in this, but it does feel more of a classic Italian Gothic horror film than it is like this sort of Herschel Gordon Lewis cover. Now, it was actually its original title, the Italian title, La Llama nel Corpo, if I pronounce that correctly, translates to The Knife in the Body, which is a similar title to The Whip and the Body, which I think came out the year prior, 1965. It was directed by Leonello Di Felice and Elio Scardamaglia, which Scardamaglia would go on to produce a bunch of exploitation films. This was the only one he ever directed. The story and screenplay, however, was done by Luciano Martino and Ernesto Gastaldi, which Gastaldi is probably my favorite Italian screenwriter. Luciano Martino, of course, Sergio Martino's brother and a producer. Which, thinking back now after seeing this, the story does, especially with like the relationships with characters, the twists, and the revelation motives of the killer. I could see this being done by Sergio Martino, maybe in a different kind of setting, not the 1870s London Gothic setting. But this is an early work by Gastaldi. And it stars William Berger, who would go on to be in $5 for an August Moon, also by Bava. My Dear Killer, and he was known for a bunch of westerns. Francois Provost, which, what was the, I think I saw, she was in A Suitcase for a Corpse, which I have not seen, is what I've been trying to find. Also known as Your Sweet Body to Kill. She was in The Sinful Nuns of Saint Valentine, which is a nunsploitation film. I thought there was another Giallo that I have seen her in, but I don't see it on here. And then everyone else I can't click on, so except for Germano Longo and Felipe Hercent, who was in Blood and Black Lace. And his performance is kind of like as he plays a patient in this named Fred, who at times kind of feels like he's doing like a Dwight Fry impression, even if that's not the intention. That's just what I got from it. But yeah, he was the one. Oh no, it was Massimo Reggi, if I pronounced that correctly, who played Fred. The one I just said, well, this says Felipe Hercent as Fred. Okay. Well, whoever, Oh, there's two Freds. I don't know who the other Fred is, but the Fred credited as Massimo Riggi, that's the one that was in Blood and Black Lace. Now, yeah, it takes place in 1870, and actually, the title and a lot of the plot elements are similar to the 1971 Giallo Slaughter Hotel, which I have reviewed. Not the biggest fan of it. You know, it takes place in this isolated, sort of insane asylum that's run by its own accord or has its own way of doing things and may not have the most well-intentioned head doctor. Might also be some sort of mad scientist doing his own medical experiments. There's a series of murders, and you know, where nurses and patients are involved, and there is some romance. This does have. There are some scenes that some melodramatic kind of romance scenes. But you can definitely see the Bava influence. I mean, one, the setting of this huge gothic, almost castle-like asylum, not really an asylum, but this place, the gothic setting does help with the gothic atmosphere. The lighting, there's not a whole lot of bright lighting. A lot of it is by fireplace or candlelight. Even when it's daytime, there's still feels kind of dark, so that when we get the flashback, there's like a story told through a flashback towards the end of the film that, you know, has a bit of romance. It's supposed to be very pleasant and happy, you know, like a happier time, where it's very bright and sunny, and it contrasts very well to the rest of the film. Also, just like, there's scenes where characters will be outside at night with torches, and the way, you know, the stone building is like almost blue from the moonlight. The colors are very influenced by Bava as well, especially the scene towards the end when the killer is running down the hallway. There's all these bright colors that just pop off the screen. Not as much as, say, Suspiria or Kill Baby Kill, but the early Bava influence is definitely present in this, and I really enjoyed seeing that. I'll also say the dubbing in this was almost pretty seamless, especially from William Berger. I almost had a question, like, is this even Italian? I don't even... There was one scene, for most of the movie I didn't notice it, but there was one scene where I was watching, I was like, this dubbing is actually very well done. There is a scene in this that switches to Italian for whatever reason, and there's no subtitles on this, and you can't change the audio, so I don't really know what they were saying, but it had to do with confessing love between two characters, and then they kiss, so it's not like you really missed anything. But, and I guess before I get into the plot, I could say this was a pretty decent Giallo. I mean, it's 87 minutes. It goes at a very fast pace. You know, almost feels like it wasn't even that long. A pretty simple story. I mean, it opens up, there's this one young female patient is attacked by a cloaked, like a black cloaked figure with a straight razor. She's chased outside, she's killed. All the while, there's this stagecoach with this married couple where the husband's trying to take the wife somewhere, she doesn't want to go. The carriage stops, he goes to look at it, she kills him, but then it spooks the horses, so it takes off and drags him, leaving her stranded in the woods. As she's walking along, she comes across some sort of grotto or cave where she sees the head doctor, played by Berger, Dr. Vance, burying the body. And then she ends up falling asleep outside. She's found and she's brought to this clinic. Which, the clinic, we get the idea that Vance is this very talented doctor who had huge prospects some years prior and is now limited to this almost, I don't want to say run down, but this just old, isolated castle of a building where he kind of chooses to be in exile. He runs it with his wife, Elizabeth, or Lisbeth, as this says, played by Mary Young. And there's a conversation between them because the movie does want us to think, or consistently think, that Vance is the killer. He's the main red herring throughout the whole film. But there's a conversation between them. We get that their relationship is kind of tumultuous. She is still madly in love with him. She hints that he might be interested in some of the young, beautiful nurses and patients. They talk about, they don't go into detail, which you can tell this is sort of the early groundwork for some of the later Gestalt and Martino films, because they hint at something that's very important, just enough to give you an idea, but not the whole thing. Talk about, they say what happened to Laura was an accident. I was acquitted. She still uses, his wife still says, yes, I committed perjury because I love you. And he was like, no perjury, I'm innocent. So it hints towards some sort of murder or accident that kind of ruined him and now kind of put him in this place. Also, there's this new nurse named Mary, who's played by Barbara Wilson. She had just started, and when she starts, she's given the rounds. Like, we only see 2 patients and just Mary. They're like the only nurses, other than this other, I guess, senior nurse that's also always there. There's also a groundskeeper, Ivan, and a bald guy. But then, like, at the end of the film, when they're all looking for the killer, there's like 9 other nurses. And they talk about, locking all the patients in their rooms. But we only see 2 patients. There's this elderly woman with a stuffed cat that she, thinks is real. And then there's Fred, who is this paranoid schizophrenic that is having more frequent and more violent attacks that seem to be spurred on by the knocking sounds coming from the 3rd floor, which does pop up from time to time. And in the beginning of the film, we do see when Dr. Vance goes up there, it's this, we don't see her face, but it's this kind of witchly looking woman. There is some tragedy in this as well, which does fit with its gothic tone as well. He mentions, because his experiment is he's trying to find these skin grafts, and he's testing them on guinea pigs. So we see her from behind. Of course, she's got this frizzy, witchy hair. We see her hand, which is all burnt, but we don't see her face yet. She won't see anybody. She won't accept any help. He talks about wearing this cloak for the rest of your life. So, is this person that's locked away or hidden away, but making all these noises, freaking everyone out, is that person the killer? But eventually, the woman who killed her husband and then saw the doctor burying the body. She's found, she's brought to the clinic, and that's really where everything kind of picks up. Because she hears the noises coming from the third floor, and upon investigating, she overhears conversation between Vance and Elizabeth, talking about murder and being acquitted. And then she comes across the person on the third floor, and when we see her face, at first it kind of looks like kind of cropsy type makeup, like from the burning, but there is a moment where she says no, like, I keep forgetting that woman's name, Giselle. She's the one played by Prevost. She starts to scream, and when we see this burnt, fleshy, burnt up woman, we see her say no, like, the way it pulls on the makeup, it like pulls down on her. It is very creepy looking. I will give credit to that. And not that it looks like the woman in the Drop of Water segment on Black Sabbath, but it is this memorable, creepy, older woman makeup, but like a burn victim. Black Sabbath is much creepier, and I will say is a better movie, but... And so, Giselle wants to blackmail the doctor for having this patient locked up above, and also overhearing the conversations about murder. And then at that point, other murders start happening, including Giselle herself. Which, again, it's not a bloody movie. I mean, when she's killed, there's just like a cut on her arm, and you can see like the outline of the latex. The girl in the very beginning of the film, we don't see any blood. And I'm not quite sure when to get into spoilers, but yeah, I guess here, but so there's plenty of red herrings. I mean, it's also, well, shortly before Giselle is killed, there is this good scene where Fred gets loose and he attacks Giselle in her bedroom. Well, because she investigates the noise a couple times. The first time she's attacked by Fred, she's going back to her room, and it's a good build-up. It has this sort of classic kind of like checking out the area kind of music, horror movie sleuth type music, and we see just a hand pick up like the glass of a lantern. When she gets back to her room, she's attacked by Fred. And then Mary, the new nurse, comes in, and she's able to talk him down. And this is the scene where it feels like he's doing like a Dwight Fry. He's doing a lot of face mugging, like looking crazy when he's about to attack Giselle, but then scared or concerned when Mary comes in. She's able to get the glass away from him that he's thrown in a cell in the cellar. It's a decent scene between two actors, Mary and Fred. But he did kind of remind me a lot of like a crazy Redfield Dwight Fry. And so you have like, is this a mad doctor? Is it Fred? At some points, it could even feel like, is Mary the killer because she's new? Then again, so is Giselle, but she's also there for like hospitable reasons, like just because she was found, not because she needs to be there. But if you're a fan of early Bava, I think you'll like this. It also has kind of an Agatha Christie type vibe because you have all these people in this one limited location. Many of them are kind of strangers, a new nurse, this woman that was found, this deep, dark secret up in this dark room, which in the scenes when characters do go up there and they only have a lantern, I do like those scenes because a lot of them are in this like wide shot, which really gives you a feel of just how big this castle is. Long like stone hallways. They have this lantern with just this little glow around them. I do like how those are lit. It does feel pretty natural as far as lighting goes. I was kind of surprised with who the killer was. Well, I'm not too surprised they went there, but and the way it was presented and the whole motive made sense, at least in the context of the film. Because the whole thing is, if this is my 80th Giallo review, you do get some that have pretty silly motives. But this one does make sense. And so yeah, for a mid-60s pre-Argento, more so Bava-oriented Giallo, or still while Giallo was being made. I mean, Blood and Black Lace came out 2 years before this, so it was still being formulated. It is a fairly decent film. The thing that helps it out the most will be the writing by both Gastaldi and Martino and its gothic atmosphere and setting. But with that, I'm going to get into spoilers, so. So after Giselle tries to blackmail Dr. Vance, there's another scene where she's laying in bed and she hears a scream, and that's because this time Lisbeth is out walking around, and there's a scream. She's been attacked, but then that night the killer also goes after Giselle, and that's when we see her the next morning with just a cut on her arm. And the one that finds her is Mary, and Dr. Vance comes in after Mary sees her, and she insists, okay, we have to contact police because, you know, Elizabeth has been attacked, Giselle is now murdered. We have to get help. He urges her not to, so he takes her into his office and he tells her this story, which in the beginning of the film, when Elizabeth and the doctor are talking about, you know, I testified for you, I was acquitted, I was innocent, you know, what happened to Laura was an accident. Laura is Elizabeth's sister. We get that story. And it was some years ago, you know, when they were much younger, which I think his first name is Robert. I'm just going to call him Robert. Robert and Elizabeth first got married. Laura is Laura's very beautiful sister, who I think Robert had feelings for as well. But, you know, he was this talented doctor that was having this huge clinic built. It was going to be the most modern and technically advanced clinic that ever was up to that point. And while it was being constructed, well, first it's this long montage of the three of them doing things, going for walks, playing cards, having fun. The music is this very sweet, happy, swollen violin. And it's this very brightly lit and very sunny, which again contrasts the dark, dreary, gothic atmosphere. So then it shows how he took Laura up on the scaffolding to show her more parts of the clinic, and he put his arm on her shoulder and she fell. And she landed in a pit of lime which ate away her flesh. And now she won't see anybody and, you know, doesn't allow anyone to go in the room, and why he's trying to do these skin graft experiments. Excuse me. And also why he doesn't want Mary to, get help from the police, because he's already ruined by that murder trial. Because he says one of the construction workers saw him push her. He was acquitted on insufficient evidence. But, he said he's already ruined. He says, I'm in this godforsaken place hoping to be forgotten. He already has nothing. Everything's been taken from him. So, being linked to another murder will only make it worse. So, and right when she says, well, the culprit will go free if we don't do anything, so I have to, that's right when groundskeeper Ivan gets their attention to say Fred has escaped. So they assume Fred did it. And so he tells Mary to go look after Elizabeth, which she does. But so Elizabeth asks to be put by the window and then asks for a shawl because she's chilly. And she even tells her where the shawl is. But when she opens the door, this bloody hand with a straight razor falls, and it's Fred. He committed suicide. Because earlier, after the scene where he's put in the cell, he keeps saying how he doesn't want to hurt anybody, and his attacks are becoming more frequent and violent, so he'd be better if he would just kill himself. So they believe he committed suicide. And then there's this scene where Robert is sitting by the fireplace. Mary's kind of doing her rounds. And she comes in the room. And then he starts professing his love to her. And that's when it switches back to Italian. But then when they kiss, that's when Elizabeth sees them. And then she runs off. He has everyone, nurses, everyone look for Elizabeth. So that's when we see like 8 or 9 more nurses. And again, this is the scene where they're outside. And again, the moon hits like the stone architecture. It gives out this very blue light. And then they have the very bright yellow and orange torches. It's a great contrast of colors that is very reminiscent of an early Bava film. But then Elizabeth goes in. We see a cloaked figure go into Mary's room, start stabbing the bed or slashing the bed. And when we see Mary come out to attack her, we can see, kind of make out the face of the person under the hood. We see that it's Elizabeth. Elizabeth was the killer the whole time. And she's stopped by Laura, which, when everyone's looking for Elizabeth, we do see Laura put her cloak on and leave the room. So she does save Mary. And that's when she says, my fall was not an accident and it was not Robert's fault. You loosened the rope. Which, I was thinking back to when I watched All Colors of Giallo. Ernesto Gastaldi himself said, all the twists have to be logical, and if you go back to earlier parts of the film, you can see where it makes sense. Because when Robert was telling his story about what happened to Laura, all 3 of them were up on the scaffolding. But Elizabeth didn't want to go any further, so she stayed behind, and then Laura and Robert went. And that was because she stayed behind and she loosened the rope. But Mary just screams in rage and slashes Laura's throat, and she dies. And again, the makeup looks fairly decent, especially for the time. Doesn't look like it has a huge budget. And you also, you get this is all out of jealousy, especially how she's been acting before with talking about how, why can't you only love me? because I think they think that patient that got killed in the beginning, like, left. So she talks about, finding young, beautiful women, doing what you need, and then hints towards murder, and they have that conversation in the beginning. So she's just running around screaming in a rage. And that's when we get to see where she's running down the hallway, and we get all these great colors of fireplace and moonlight and, just like the color of the stone walls. Very Bava looking. I really like that shot. And that's when Robert comes in and finds Mary, sees Laura dead, and she tells him that it's Elizabeth. So then we get the ending where everyone is outside and they see Elizabeth come out to this, well, it's kind of like a castle, so it's not really a window, but this opening up in like the tower of the clinic. And she just hurls herself off of it. And we see the dummy like fall. But when everyone comes around, Robert holds her and she says, "Yeah, it was me. Laura's accident was me on purpose because I was jealous of her. I was jealous of all young, pretty girls because I loved you." And then she dies. Robert says he loves her too. And then it ends with Robert leaving the clinic. He's in his stagecoach. They're leaving, but he sees Mary with her bags. He stops, and he takes her bag, and they get on together, leave, and it ends. So yeah, I mean, not totally surprised that Elizabeth was the killer. Again, thinking back, you could see all the breadcrumbs, but also just while watching the film, I was thinking, I was thinking back to my experience with Slaughter Hotel, which I would say this is a better movie. It's a better made movie. If you want blood and sleaze, then Slaughter Hotel is more of your movie. But I think this one just has better atmosphere, everything. Story. You can see all the breadcrumbs of how it was laid out. A lot of the red herrings do kind of feel forced. So, and also you think, oh, and it was said by Laura because she saw Elizabeth slash herself with the straight razor. And she was attacked off screen. We just heard her scream. So, yeah, it does make sense. And I do think that's great groundwork for the amazing Giallo that Gastaldi would go on to write for Sergio Martino in the early 70s. I think this is a very decent early Giallo film. Is it one of the best of the 60s? No, but it does have a lot going for it. It does have a lot of nice things to say about it, especially its atmosphere. Even though the script and the dialogue may not be the strongest, the writing as far as what moves the plot along and for how it ends, I'd say is well written or well enough written, at least to mention. The acting, for the most part, is okay. I'd say Berger is probably the best actor of the film. Some of it does feel sort of classic acting, where it's overacting. But, yeah, I still think it's a fairly decent... I was actually surprised by it. I thought it was going to be this super low-budget, forgotten, not very good Giallo, but I was actually pleasantly surprised. I thought it was fairly good. So yeah, 1966, The Murder Clinic, which, again, if you're an early Bava fan, definitely check it out, because the influences are definitely there. But anyway, I got a few more Giallo to get to, a couple more Italian horror films to get to, so stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.